Welcome back to the Fuji Guys channel. My name is Francis. So you've just got yourself a brand new Fujifilm X100VI and you'd like to know how to set up a couple of the features or how to operate certain things. Well, you came to the right place, so stick around. Alright, so let's get started. So first, we want to put our NPW126S battery in, just like that, and then insert our SD card. We can close the battery door. So before we do anything, you probably want to format your SD card. So we'll just go into the menu and then go to the wrench icon and then user setting and then select format. Now this will delete all of your photos or anything that's on the card, so make sure that everything is backed up. So we can press OK, and then we have a fresh memory card to start. Now personally, when I first start, I do want to go into the IQ menu and then make sure I have Fine plus RAW, or you could choose normal plus RAW or RAW only. Personally, I want to select Fine plus RAW so I can take full advantage of those film simulations. And then personally, I like to set my autofocus to single, so it's set right there. So I am ready to go. Now to navigate the menus, you will of course click on the menu OK button, and then you can use the joystick to navigate through the different areas, to go back and forth through the different sections. But you can also use the front and the rear command dial. So if you move the rear command dial, you can see I'm moving elements by elements of the menu. And if I turn or scroll the front command dial, I can jump full pages. So that goes a lot faster. So you can use a combination of the front and the rear command dial to navigate through the different menu options. So exposure control is going to be done beautifully through physical dials. So on the lens itself, we do have the aperture ring to select our aperture. We can put it to A if we wanted it to be automatic. We have our shutter speed dial. Same thing, we can put it to A if we want it automatic. And then embedded into the shutter speed dial, we have our ISO. So we can pull on the dial and then rotate. And then once we select our desired ISO, we can simply push down to lock it in place. Now, if you use any sort of program, auto or aperture priority or shutter speed priority, you can use the exposure compensation dial right here, which is very useful. And then as this is a mirrorless camera, you can have a live preview of how your image is going to look. So quite handy. Now, if we want to enable different modes, so we're just going to start with putting the aperture to A and then having our shutter speed and ISO set to desired specific values. We are now into the shutter priority mode. Now if I choose my aperture but then I select my shutter speed to be on A, I am now into aperture priority mode. Now if I put everything on A, including the ISO, I am now in the program mode. And of course, in all of those automatic or semi-automatic modes, I can use the exposure compensation dial to over or underexpose my image. Now, the Fujifilm X100VI features the iconic hybrid viewfinder, which means that I can look through it and then have an optical viewfinder. I can have an optical viewfinder with a sub-monitor at the bottom right corner, or I can have an electronic viewfinder. So how we go about changing those different modes to navigate from the optical viewfinder to the electronic viewfinder, I simply pull on the lever at the front. So by pulling on it, I can navigate through optical and electronic. And then if I want to enable or disable the sub monitor at the bottom right, I can push on the lever to toggle the two modes. So when using the electronic viewfinder or the LCD, you will have a live preview of your exposure. Now, if you wanted to disable that, you can simply go into the menu and then go to the wrench icon, to the screen setup, and then you can go to the preview, exposure, white balance, and manual mode. And then you can select to have only the white balance preview or have it off, so that if you're using strobes in the studio, for example, you'll always see I guess a natural view like your eyes are seeing, and not the preview, because the camera doesn't know, you know, the flash power that's going to output. So your preview would be very dark, which is not very useful. So turning it off will help you see better if you're shooting in a studio environment or with flashes. But in natural light, I would advise to turn it to preview, exposure, and white balance. Of course, the Fujifilm X100VI is highly customizable, and then that's what I love about Fujifilm cameras, is that you can assign specific functions to a lot of function buttons. So in order to assign functions to function buttons, you simply have to press on the display back button for a second or two, and then you'll see a diagram of the camera pop up. And then if you go down using the joystick or the rear command dial, you can see highlighted in green where the buttons are, and then you can go in and customize how they will behave. So let's say I take this function button 1, which is the one up top here, and then I want to assign that preview exposure that we spoke about before if I'm in the studio and I want to disable the live preview. So I'm just going to go down the options, and then I will go and find the preview, exposure, white balance, and manual mode, and then I can assign it to that button. And then now when I push on that button, you can see I will be able to enable or disable the preview exposure. So that's how you can assign your most frequently used functions to function buttons. Another thing that's great with Fujifilm cameras is that you have an in-camera RAW conversion that's available to you. So if you're shooting in RAW, you can, in the camera, make adjustment before you send it to your smartphone, for example. So if I go and take an example, I have this image here, and then I will press on the Q button, and then I have all of my options for the RAW conversion. So I can go about changing the file type. I can change, you know, I can push and pull the exposure, so if I wanted it one stop brighter, I can play around with film simulation, so if I wanted to change it to Reality Ace maybe, I can add the grain, and then so on, and then I can press the Q button to process it, and then I have a preview of the image. Now, if I'm not happy with it, I can press on back, and then all of the settings that I've changed still remains, so I can go and just edit the one that's not up to my taste. So the push and pull, the one stop was a little bit too much, so I'm going to push by 1/3. Instead, press on the Q. That looks good to me, so I'm going to press on the Q button again to save it. And then you can see I have my saved JPEG image. Now the Fujifilm X100VI has a fast lens, an f2 lens on it. So if you're shooting in broad daylight and then you wanted to shoot some videos, or shoot photos wide open in broad daylight, and then the shutter speed max out at 1/4000 mechanically, and then you need it to be darker, then you can enable the built-in force stops and defilter. So it's very simple to enable. So that lever at the front here that we use for the viewfinder, if we pull on it and hold for about 2 seconds, we can enable the ND filter. So you see that it's on, and then I pull again and hold, and then it's off. So again, quite neat to have built into the camera. We can have force stop of light cut, basically to allow us to shoot wide open in very, very bright environments. Now the Fujifilm X100VI can do video up to 4K, which is great. Video, which is great. Add to the fact that it has in-body image stabilization. It's going to make for a great, quick, video capture. So the settings I like to set up when I want to do video, first of all, you want to go into the drive and then go to the movie mode. So by simply pushing up once, you directly get into the movie mode rather than going down multiple times. So now we're in the movie mode. Now I'm going to go into the menu, and then the first thing I'm going to go is into the movie setting list, and then I'm going to go in and then I can set my resolution. So you can do up to 6.2K video, which is awesome. Personally, I like to stay at 4K HQ, and then my frame rate is going to be at 23.98 since we're using digital, and if you're talking, you don't want to have some drift. So basically, it's just simpler to set it to 23.98. Then I want to go into my media recording settings. So I want to record to an SD card. The codec I want to use is H.265.422. So that's the highest quality I can get, which is great. And then the bit rate is going to be, my personal preference is going to be 200 megabits per second, which is the highest, but you could set a lower bit rate. It's going to give you smaller files, but having a higher bit rate is going to give you more image quality. So it's up to you at this point. I personally set it to 200 megabits per second. And then you can choose whether you want to have log recording, HLG, or film simulation, which we like to call quick 4K or now quick 6.2 or 8K. In that case, we can have up to quick 6.2K, which is great. I personally love our film simulation and just straight out the camera, so that's what I'm choosing. Then I want to go into my AF/MF menu, and then I want to set the autofocus to area. So I want to be able to choose where I want the camera to focus by using the focusing box. That's my personal preference. And then if you're going to be, interviewing people or something like that, or there's going to be someone in your frame, you can definitely enable face and eye detection. That's going to be very helpful. But in general, if you're not, necessarily aiming to film people or specific people, I would stay with just the box like so, and then you can just tap on the screen. I personally, it was set to AF. I personally like to set it to area, and then you want to have it on continuous if you want continuous focusing, and then again you can move that box for the area. And then you can also change the size of the AF box, which is something very neat. If you want something very precise, you can have it very small. Now in general, I would say try to have it on the bigger end. It's going to be better to focus on the subject you're shooting at. If you're hand holding it specifically, having a bigger box is definitely going to help. You also want to make sure that you have in-body image stabilization turned on. That's going to be great. Now I'm using the 4K HQ, which means I can't use the in-body image stabilization plus digital image stabilization. Now if you wanted to be able to use it, you would need to go in and change your 4K mode to the 4K non-HQ, and then going back down to IS mode, you can see we can now choose the IBIS and digital image stabilization, which will apply a slight crop to your image to be able to move around and add some extra stability to your image. If you want to aim at something, maybe someone that you're interviewing, you might want to enable the IBIS boost mode. So that's for more static handheld subject. Like I said, if you're interviewing someone, that's going to be quite useful in that specific case. But if not, if you're moving around, I would highly suggest to turn it off, because it will try to fight you, because it's trying to stay, as still as possible. Now, if you want to pair your X100VI with the XApp to use with your smartphone, to be able to do a couple of things like geotagging, to sync time and then transfer images. So you simply long press on the display back button, and then you'll see Bluetooth is the first option. Then you go to pairing. Make sure Bluetooth is turned on. You go to pairing, then the camera is going to start, broadcasting its signal. And then on the XApp on your phone, you press on the plus button, and then you will see that the phone will detect the camera, and then you can register, you can give it a name, and then here you go. On the camera itself, you can sync the time and date with your phone, which is also something that I would advise to do. And then there you go. And then as mentioned before, you can track where you are, so you can tag your images in the metadata. So if you want to set those settings in the menu, you simply go into the network USB setting, go to Bluetooth and smartphone setting, and then you can go in and then toggle on and off the various options. So smartphone location sync, I personally want to have that on. So that's going to be great if you want to have geotagging on your photos, if you're traveling and things like that. And then also having it paired to the XApp is going to be useful. If you want to make sure your camera is up to date, you can go down and look at firmware upgrade and then see if you needed to make an update. As you can see, I already have the latest firmware, but if I didn't, I can simply press, it would download the firmware on my phone and then send it over to my X100VI, and then follow on with the process of updating my firmware, which is great. Now, having a fixed lens camera is great, but sometimes you want a little bit more flexibility, and that's why we have the option to use the two converters. So we have the TCL X100 II, so that's going to be your teleconverter. That's going to give you a 50mm field of view equivalent on 35mm full frame. And then we have the WCL X100 version 2, which is going to be our wide one, so that will give you a 28mm equivalent field of view. Now if we want to attach it to the camera, we simply have to unscrew the front ring, and then we can simply go, I like to give it a couple backwards turn to make sure the threads align, and then we can screw in the conversion lens. So just like that, I now have a 28mm equivalent field of view, and then the camera also auto detects when the converter is put on. So as you can see on the top here, it says wide, W to indicate the wide, and as I remove it, you can see that it's gone, and then when I bring it back, it's discovered. Same thing is going to happen with the teleconverter. This time it's going to give me a T in that case. So that's one way you can expand, the flexibility of the X100VI if you wanted, more options in terms of focal length. All right, so that's going to be it for this how-to on the Fujifilm X100VI. Now, if you'd like to know more about this and other Fujifilm products, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And until next time, c'était Francis pour le Fuji Guy.